Hey, This Week in Mormons audience, this is Kurt Francom. Yes, I'm the Wizard of Oz that's usually behind the scenes, that doesn't get on here and host very often. But hey, when my brother from another mother, when my pastor from another faith, is that stupid? Pastor Jeff is here. I've got to be in the host seat. So what's up, Pastor Jeff?
Hey, how's it going? I didn't know this was actually live, so I'm going to take full responsibility for us being a little late.
Yeah, come on.
My bad.
Anyways, I guess, I don't know. I figure, so here's the thing. We did a live, one of our other hosts did a live last week, and it went gangbusters, mainly because it had to deal with the Chad Daybell case, if you're familiar at all. And anything Daybell is hot right now. So, so if you wouldn't mind,
but I have seen a lot of videos out there on the topic.
If you wouldn't mind if we call you Pastor Daybell, just for SEO reasons.
No. I don't know what kind of connotations are attached to that, so maybe not.
Yeah, not a good last name to have these days. But I digress. You actually, you were one of my first interviews when I took over This Week in Mormons, and it was really well received. But that was like when you were young and new to the Hello Saints world, right? So maybe give us an update of those that are listening. I think the This Week in Mormons audience maybe isn't as familiar with the work you do. So now's your chance. Give us a summary who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So long story short, I'm a weird 2024 millennial version of a YouTube pastor, whatever that is. But this is the world that we're living in. No, I pastored for many years in the Midwest and started a YouTube channel as an evangelical exploring Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it has gone well as far as the receptivity of Latter-day Saints to have the conversation. So we are now living in Utah. The channel is called Hello Saints, and it's been an amazing journey, and been able to not only learn a lot, but just make really important connections with people like Kurt Francom to expand the conversation.
That's for sure. So, and we've done some fun videos together that I'll try and remember to link to. But I was sort of your tour guide through the Saratoga Springs Temple. I think that was our first video, right?
And I believe so.
And then you kidnapped me on a Sunday morning and took me to 3 Protestant churches. That was fun.
Return the favor. I went to temple with you, and you went to church with me.
And we both walked away thinking that was weird. But, it was a lot of fun.
It was fun. Yeah.
So,
and we actually did one other video in the car, kind of spontaneously driving down to St. George one time.
Oh yeah, we did. I forgot about that.
About the perils of interfaith dialogue and all the ways people can be skeptical. So
yeah, right. And then you've started a podcast as well, and I've been a guest on your podcast. But
that's right. Yep.
There are other people that Jeff talks to, and they're fascinating as well. Not quite as intriguing, but they're out there. So
debatable. But.
So I'm just like, give us the pulse on, because we're going to talk about some really cool interfaith project that we've actually both been working on together behind the scenes. You definitely has more sweat equity on your part than me, but nonetheless, a cool project. But give us like the pulse on interfaith, like right now that you're. I mean, if there was a podcast this week in interfaith efforts, what would you say about this week in interfaith efforts?
It's so tricky because it depends on what angle you're talking from. Like from a Latter-day Saints standpoint, I think it's going pretty well. There's a lot of interfaith efforts taking place from the church, sending people to understand other faith groups and worship practices and traditions. And it's one of the reasons why I think there's been a receptivity to me, kind of, as I've been jokingly meandering into Zarahemla and being well accepted by the natives here. But on the evangelical side, I think it still is a little tricky because where there's a well-meaning urgency to make sure people understand how we believe. When people don't agree with us, there's not always as much receptivity to linking arms. I remember working in a church years ago, and a pastor told me, I pastored at a church right by a large Air Force base in the Midwest. And so the chaplains were always doing stuff at this Air Force base, the various chaplains. And I got invited to go to an interfaith breakfast. And this pastor pulled me aside, because I was a very young pastor at this point. And he said, you need to be careful. If they're doing interdenominational, breakfast, you should go. But if it's interfaith, I'd stay away from it if I were you, because there's going to be
really?
all of these different other religions there. So that I've got to be honest, that is a bit of a posture that is taken by a lot of evangelicals. So
yeah.
So there's work to be done.
So I mean, today, if you walk into a room full of, and you go to these meetings, right, of other Protestant pastors or individuals, influencers, whatever you want to call them, who, you know, in the context of interfaith work, like, and maybe I need to adjust that a little bit, like just general evangelicals in a room, you walk in, you say, hey, I've been talking to the Mormons. Like, what are the misconceptions that you are going to anticipate coming at you right at first about us?
There's going to be two groups. One, well, there should be three groups. First group is going to be, are they the ones that believe that the Archangel Michael is Jesus? No, those are the Jehovah's Witnesses. There's a lot of people that they have no idea what Latter-day Saints believe. And unfortunately, the stigmas that most people have that back in the Midwest, it's still tied to stuff like, polygamy and stuff like that, right? It's like, well, no, that's a splinter group, that's FLDS. So there's a lot of explaining just to like what Mormonism is. And I use the term Mormonism because they're so far behind, they don't even know that they prefer to be referred to as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So
yeah,
that's
who does this podcast, obviously, by the name of
right. Yeah, you're so anti-establishment.
Oh yeah.
And then there's another group that is going to take sort of the opposite posture and say, well, they don't embrace what we embrace, and as a result, you know, it's they'll kind of malign in some ways or talk negatively. And then there's people in between that'll say, you know, I don't know a ton about it, but I'm willing to learn more. So you and I were just recently on a episode of Quick Media with our boy Greg Mattson.
That's right.
And that was one of the things that I had mentioned, is that it's so unpredictable depending on which evangelicals you're engaging with as to where they're at posture-wise when it comes to interfaith dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just thinking if we flip the tables there, like walking into a room full of Latter-day Saints, like, and, you know, I tell him, I've been, you know, I'm close friends with Pastor Jeff, or I've been talking with evangelicals or visiting them. Like, I think we're going to go to, like, obviously you're Protestants are the big brother in the room because there's just so many more Protestants in the, you know, in our country, if we just focus on our country, than Latter-day Saints. So, you know, obviously we're aware of them, where, like you said, some people may just misunderstand who we are or get us confused with a different group. But, you know, I think a lot of people go to, that, you know, we're almost like have our defense up, like, they think we're not Christians, and man, that's just mean, you know, like, I can't believe they think that, or they're, man, you know, they're just limited on what they know. If they just open their eyes to the beauty of the Book of Mormon and the doctrines there and those things, right? And I don't know, anything else you'd add? I mean, you're well familiar with our people now. Anything else?
Yeah.
Misconceptions you hear on the other side?
Even since living here, I've been really well received by Latter-day Saints, even though, you know, I actually appreciate anybody that's kind, right? Like any Latter-day Saint, hey, watch your channel, love what you do. I really like it when people are like, hey, I really appreciate the fact that you, even though you disagree with us on some things, you take the time to listen and understand us. That is the most rewarding thing, because Latter-day Saints, I don't think, are taken seriously as often as they should be when it comes to various beliefs and practices. And regardless of the reasons for that, I think there's just an appreciation that I've experienced from Latter-day Saints. Now, obviously, there's some that don't like what I'm doing, don't trust what I'm doing, and I totally get that that's just going to come with the territory. But I haven't had negative experiences, and I will say, I don't think that you've had negative experiences, like going into, you know, take your mission out of the picture, but like today going into a evangelical church, you're not feeling people necessarily breathing down your neck or asking you to get out of town.
Yeah. I mean, and the problem usually is most of us don't walk into that church, right? But just with my experience with you, other than, I'd say outside of Utah, you know, I have a good friend like in Missouri, right? And it's like, you can't escape, you know, the Protestant influence there, just because everybody on your street goes to one church or another, right? So yeah. definitely recognize my Utah-ness in all this, but yeah, I never felt cornered or like, oh, we got to talk to this guy. We got to go save his soul or else.
Well, and that's just the thing. I mean, and this is what I've been pondering on this point a lot lately. And that is, there are people that can be very uncomfortable on the evangelical side with a charitable, harmonious interfaith conversation for reasons of that pressure to like, we need to be spreading the gospel. We need to be converting, making disciples, all that stuff. Okay, that's fine. I get it. I mean, I guarantee every Latter-day Saint I talk to, whether they voice it or not, would love to see my wife and I baptized into the church. Okay, let's just be honest. But my whole thing that I keep coming back to is like, so even where we adamantly disagree on certain doctrines, maybe we even have like disheartening or concerning feelings about what the other faith group believes. Why do we have to be so mean to each other? Like, or why do we have to treat each other as less than? Why do we have to be so hostile? I mean, isn't that all the more reason to be kind to one another and to just like be open to ongoing conversation and relationship? So that's kind of the space that I'm hoping to expand, at least from an evangelical standpoint, with Hello Saints.
Yeah. This is kind of a little bit random, but tangent, but nonetheless, it's interesting to talk about. Like when you talk about that breakfast you went to where it's like interfaith as opposed to interdenominational, like is there like obviously in the Latter-day Saint context there's somewhat of a tradition or pressure of we're trying to convert your people to us. I mean, I literally spent 2 years of my life in Sacramento, not necessarily like targeting Protestant. I was more, especially as a Spanish speaking missionary, I was definitely working with Catholic Latinos, but like is there a similar, and that's what I wonder if some of them are a little bit like resistant to engage because like, oh, they just want to baptize us. Is there a similar dynamic happening? Like if you as a pastor, you run into somebody who could easily go to your church on Sunday, but you find out that they're visiting they attend a different church. Is there ever like pressure, or not that you would do this, but maybe other pastors would be like, hey man, you should really come check us out sometime. And maybe this would be a better fit for you and your family. Is that happening?
That's a great question. You mean within just Protestant denominations?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Now we don't use the same language like you should be baptized into our church, because baptism isn't quite as much of a gateway into being a part of a church, because Protestant Christianity is kind of like Europe. Like as long as you have a passport, you can go to like Italy, then Germany, then France, and you're good to go. Right. So it's kind of what Protestant Christianity is. But there are absolutely, especially in the Bible Belt and in the Midwest, there can be this like competitive thing going on where it's like, oh, hey, that person over there from Faith Family Church down the road is here today. I don't know why they're here, but we shouldn't get, hey, how's it going? Like, everything good? Like,
yeah.
I think you're gonna be coming back. We got a men's thing this Saturday if you want to come. I think well-meaning, but there can be a little bit of a competitive thing there that isn't always healthy, as well-meaning as it might be. But I think the only time it gets a little bit weird and tricky is if we don't totally know what to do with it. If it's like, if a Catholic walks in or an Episcopalian to like a more mainline contemporary, like evangelical church where there's, smoke machines and lasers, because those are two very different worship styles. Right. So at that point, you're kind of like, what's going on here? But it just it depends. It depends on the situation.
Yeah. So is there a little bit more of a, like if a Catholic walks into one of your services, is that them, being I don't know what you call them, a part of that church, that's a much larger leap than someone who's already evangelical, who happens to come to
Yeah. I mean, if obviously certain doctrinal distinctions aside, a Methodist could go to a Baptist church and not skip a beat, or a Lutheran could go to a Presbyterian church and not miss a beat. Okay. Now there are some wider gaps to bridge. Like, I don't know if a Presbyterian would ever feel comfortable going to an Assemblies of God church, because if they're more charismatic, Presbyterians are more historical and theological. When a Catholic walks in, though, you would almost assume, first of all, you wouldn't know they're Catholic unless they told you. But if a Catholic walked into my church and they said, hey, I'm a lifelong Catholic and I'm coming to your church for the first time, I would assume you're searching. you're on a spiritual journey right now to like leave that faith context into ours, as opposed to if a Baptist walked in, I'd be like, oh, you're just checking out another church.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, interesting. And obviously that person could come week after week, and you would still never know that they're Catholic. But would there be a point where,
well, until they stand up and worship, and instead of raise their hands, they do this, then I would know. But, yeah.
So true. Interesting. And a lot of people, we talk about this offline a lot, just some of the pushback you get. Obviously, it's a wild world in the internet. No matter what you talk about, there's always some level of trolling happening out there. And sometimes people, and I talk to them, that people hear that we're good friends, and they, usually, hey, listen, like, what's the deal with that guy now? Really, like, what's his intentions, And I'm like, the intentions are pure. Now, if I could be duped as much as the next guy, but if Jeff's duped me, man, he's got me good. But really, from my experience with you and the work you do, and seeing you behind the scenes, and the type of people you talk to, and there's really some good intention there of truly striving to understand our people, and even being here in Utah, and I think the intentions are pure. But a lot of people, I think Latter-day Saints, don't realize you sometimes get some grief on the other side from evangelicals. How would you, like, why would they, in an interfaith context, like, why would they have a problem with what you're doing?
It's a good question. I have a lot to say about what you just asked.
Well, you can go anywhere you want.
So you and I talk every day, pretty much. So we're constantly having these conversations, and you've had a front row seat to this journey that I'm on.
Yeah. So
when I say fighting criticism with curiosity, you have seen me fight criticism with curiosity.
Absolutely.
There have even been times I actually Marco Polo'd you 2 days ago, and I said something super honest about my view of something tied to a Latter-day Saint thing. And after I turned it off, I was like, I hope I wasn't too abrasive there. I hope I didn't offend Kurt and all this other stuff, because the reality is I have strong beliefs about my position, right? I do. Yeah. And, but this whole fighting criticism with curiosity, what it's doing is it's allowing me to stay on this path longer, to really try to be open. Like, that's what this comes down to. I'm trying to be open here. So that's the answer to the question then.
Yeah.
Where evangelicals are not liking what I'm doing, they feel that I'm being too open.
I mean, some of them, again, I don't want to blanket statement
right.
everybody.
It's some of them. It's not all of them. And they feel that if I'm giving, this is a horrible illustration, but it's probably the best way for me to put it. You remember all those years in politics, whenever people would be like, we're not going to have a meeting with the North Koreans, because the moment we sit at a table with them, we're giving credibility to their whatever, right? And that's kind of how some evangelicals look at sitting down with Latter-day Saints. It's like, don't even give them a time of day, because, then you're legitimizing their beliefs. And I just adamantly disagree with that approach. I think it is okay to listen to what someone is passionate about within their faith context. Okay, I'm going to legitimize that they passionately believe and have faith and have a testimony tied to their paradigm. Mm-hmm. Why should I be the gatekeeper to that? I could just go into that conversation and hear you out. And that's where I'm gaining a lot of, I guess I'm building up some strength to some of the pushback I'm getting. But I also feel like I've got a lot of data points at this point. A lot of the criticism I'm getting, whether it's from Latter-day Saints or evangelicals, if I'm going to be honest, here's what I'm finding, when I just process it all. Most of the people that really hate what I'm doing cite that I'm being too nice. Mm-hmm. Latter-day Saints that see my niceness see it as deception.
Yeah.
Evangelicals that see that I'm being too nice see it as me caving on my biblical orthodox convictions. And if people aren't liking me because I'm being too nice, I'm learning to be okay with that.
Right. Yeah. And that's really, as anybody who's spent a good amount of time in these efforts of creating an online platform and having really insightful conversations, you just sort of get to a point where you have to turn to a group of people and say, you know what, this isn't for you. Like, I don't have to win you over. Just dismiss me. Like, move on with your life. Right now, I don't always do that, but you know, the internet's going to internet. But big Audrey says, I love it when you two collaborate. I listen to both of your podcasts. Keep up the good work. You know, our wives tell us that all the time.
I was going to say, is that Alana or Joy? No,
it's Audrey. So that's good.
I recognize Audrey. She comments on Hello Saints videos a lot.
Oh, cool. Hey, look at that, Audrey. You're a friend here. So, and then this is Matt Miles. He's usually, I feel like I'm in his chair today because he's one of our hosts on This Week in Mormons. He says, I've often wondered about Jeff's take on covenants. How does Jeff respond to the idea that people who enter into covenants with God have a special relationship with God? What do you think, Jeff?
I 100% agree. I think the way that we handle those covenants is just unique, right? So we believe that Jesus was the one who ratified the Abrahamic and Mosaic covenants to the point that he, by becoming human, was able to fulfill those covenants on our behalf with God. So we still by faith enter into those covenants. And by entering into that covenant by faith, we have a special relationship with God. We don't get quite as specific and detailed into various types of covenants and ordinances like Latter-day Saints do. So we consider ourselves new covenant people. We just don't see it that it's necessarily tied to as much specific covenants that Latter-day Saints do.
Right. Yeah. You know, to me, it's the same music. We're just doing a different dance. And I get there, and we've had long conversations about this, even on our trip down to St. George. We kind of went back and forth on this because, so if I'm understanding right, you know, in the Old Testament, there's a lot of covenant talk, right? And when Christ came, he's like, great, that was wonderful for a time, but that is over now. It's just me. And I fulfilled the law, right? I fulfilled the covenant. Now just have faith in me. Where we say, yes, that was great for then. I fulfilled I fulfilled the covenant, and but that relationship, these rights and ordinances are still made available for you to enter into that relationship type of thing.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's a crude explanation of it.
No, I think that was well put. I think it's well put, and I think we would point to from a Mosaic standpoint, we see Jesus talk a lot. He references the law of Moses quite frequently, and being the fulfillment of that, and Paul does as well. But Paul also talks a lot about the whole Abrahamic covenant, going all the way back to a chosen people. He does this in the book of Galatians. We don't know if Paul wrote Hebrews, but in Hebrews there's a lot of talk of Abraham. So I think that we do see Christ being the arbiter of covenant relationship with God, and it's by that regenerated faith relationship that we can participate in that special relationship with God.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. I should have just invited Matt to host this with me, because he's back for another question. And we always say when Matt asks a question, we say, wow, what a great question, Matt. Because anyways, it's an inside joke. But another question. I've heard Jeff talk before about why LDS members are not Christian. Are LDS members more Christian than Muslim, Hindus, or Buddhists?
I don't know if I've ever outright said that Latter-day Saints aren't Christians.
Right. I've never heard that from you.
I've probably alluded to the fact that there are many in my tribe.
There's differences, right?
Yeah, and I've pointed to those differences. What I try to do is to just get a little bit more into the nuance of what do we mean by Christian? If we're talking about someone who follows the teachings of Jesus as taught in the Gospels, then Latter-day Saints 100%, that Christian label would apply, because Latter-day Saints believe in the Jesus of the Gospels, the teachings of Jesus in the Gospels. So where things can get tricky, though, is when we're talking about beyond the historic Jesus, some of the claims about Jesus. Did he really appear to the Nephites? Is he the offspring of Heavenly Father and Heavenly Mother? That's where ongoing conversation needs to continue between Latter-day Saints and evangelicals, because we cannot ignore that those are significant differences that have a big impact on a lot of doctrines. So I just don't think it's as simple to say they're not Christians, because if I'm going to be honest with you, I could point to a lot of evangelicals that I question whether they're Christians tied to their beliefs or practices. Now, I'm not the one to determine that, though, which is why I don't think I would have ever made a statement like that.
Yeah. And really, I think, and we've talked about this before, but it really is sort of this simple or this silly dynamic that people keep poking at. Like, there's so much more beyond that question or beyond that, definition that's worth talking about. And I want to reframe it more of like, just from my experience with you and what I've learned from you and others of like when an evangelical comes to me and says, you believe in a different Christ, I'm more apt to say, you know what, I think we do. And that's a beautiful thing, because if we do believe that we are a restored church with additional revelation that's been revealed, like, of course we would define Christ in a more dynamic way, because, for all intents and purposes, we believe we have more information in which to define Christ and his role. So to me, I don't see it as like a deficit when somebody, when an evangelical comes at me with that, when I'm like, okay, like, we see Christ differently in his role in a lot of things, and that's okay, but.
Well, and I think this really gets back to this whole conversation on interfaith dialogue. One of the greatest lessons that I've been learning over the past couple of years is to stop telling other people what they believe.
Yeah.
Like,
so
even
true.
that statement, you believe in a different Jesus. It's like, time out. Don't tell me what I believe. Like,
Right.
If you want to say, I believe in a different Jesus than you, I feel like that's a little bit more appropriate, because that's me saying, I'm hearing you explain Jesus. Well, I believe in a different Jesus, or that, like, I view things differently. But, with this whole interfaith thing, I think that's why Latter-day Saints are a little bit ahead of the game in interfaith dialogue, because from what I understand, and this is what I've been told, there was a more insular culture that had this sort of us for no more posture from, we'll use it just for timing reference, in Mormonism in the past. We are Mormons. We are the one true church, kind of that whole thing. But I've been hearing Latter-day Saints be a little bit more open to the fact that, yeah, listen, we have a strong conviction about the prophetic voice that came through Joseph Smith and ongoing revelation, and that this is the restored church and all these other things. But there's been more of what I've been receiving, Latter-day Saints saying, this is what we believe, as opposed to telling me what I believe as a Protestant. Whereas Protestants, I think we can sometimes think that we've got the corner market on belief, and we're going to tell everybody what they believe, which I think doesn't help. So
yeah, it's so true. And for me, that really dovetails into this virtual summit that you're putting together. It starts next week, right?
That's right. It starts a week from today on June 11th, and it goes until June 20th. And the whole idea here is, it's almost like Hello Saints Concentrate. It's bringing more voices to the table. So as opposed to just being this evangelical pastor that's trying to do this side-by-side comparison and understanding the LDS church, we can just look at these topics. Every day is one topic. Topics ranging from who is Jesus, what is truth, family and marriage, what's heaven going to be like, and whatever topic is presented that day, you'll hear a presentation from both a Latter-day Saint and an evangelical. So you'll be able to hear kind of side by side. This is, not debating. This isn't Latter-day Saints and evangelicals teaching about what the other faith group believes, but just like, this is a pure, fully informed view of how this topic is handled within that faith context.
Yeah. And I had the opportunity to be part of where you, as a evangelical pastor, interview 3 bishops about their experience being pretty much a lead pastor in their congregation. And then tomorrow I'm recording sort of the opposite of that, where I'm a bishop and I'm going to interview a handful of pastors, and we're going to talk leadership and dynamics they face. And I'm excited for it. That'll be fun.
I'm really excited for it. One of the unique things about this interview that you're recording tomorrow, which will air during the summit later on, is that I'm connected to all of you, and I don't think any of you really know each other. So we have and there's unique pastoral experiences in there. Nate Fox, who pastors in Utah, he's pastored in Utah for a couple decades. Curtis Gilbert, who pastors in St. Louis, and then Kyle Bashirs, who pastors in Mobile, Alabama. So you have Utah, Midwest, Bible Belt, and it should make for a pretty fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. It'd be fun. And then with these other topics, what was the process you went through to decide on what topics that would be covered?
I mean, anything with Hello Saints is really driven by my own curiosities. So these are topics that I have felt have kind of emerged as some of the more interesting, either the most interesting discussion because there's so much similarity, or the most interesting topic to discuss because I feel like there's so much misperception around them. I think faith and works is a really good example. The first day is on faith and works. There's a lot of evangelicals who will say the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a works-based salvation. Okay. And there's a lot of Latter-day Saints who say evangelical Christianity says that works doesn't matter. All you have to do is say a prayer, and then you can keep living however you want. Both of those are inaccurate. And so then on this first day, you've got Jacob Hansen from Thoughtful Faith articulating a Latter-day Saint view of faith and works, and a Lutheran, ground zero reformist talking about, his name's Jordan Peterson, not Jordan Peterson, different Jordan. Jordan Cooper.
You get a lot more signups of Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Cooper, who's a Lutheran pastor, who's going to articulate the Protestant view there. So hopefully that will dispel misconceptions and allow all of us to be more informed on that topic.
Awesome. That's cool. Audrey's back again. She asks, Jeff, what do you think about lay people being called as bishops of LDS congregations?
Audrey, I had a professor in seminary, and in my context, that's grad school for pastors. And
not your high school junior year when you were in seminary.
No, I was in my 30s raising 4 kids and writing papers till 1 a.m. And this professor was saying that he believed that if we really want to be biblical about leadership in the church, most of the disciples were at the very least bivocational. The apostles were. They were tent makers, they were fishermen, they were carpenters, right? So he said, and at this point I was in full-time ministry, like full vocational ministry. He said, it's my belief there's nothing wrong with full-time ministry, but I think that every pastor should either be volunteer or bivocational. And I remember kind of pushing back, being like, well, I disagree. Because I was sitting comfy in my full-time job pastor role, right?
Yeah.
But then a few years later, I started working more in the marketplace. I launched a video production company with some friends. And since even stepping back from my congregational role a couple of years ago, as I've been pressing more into Hello Saints, I think it's a beautiful thing when people who are shepherding the church have, they're also walking life in the world. Sometimes in the Protestant world, we can find ourselves in this bubble, this sanitized evangelical Protestant bubble, and you can lose touch with the world. You can lose touch with people. So I don't have a problem with lay people being called as bishops to LDS congregations. I will say that if I'm going to be fully honest, as an outsider, I feel that more training could be done for those bishops so that they're more prepared for that role. And I feel for bishops a lot. So being a pastor, having the training that I had and being an understudy of another pastor for a few years, I feel for bishops a lot and kind of wish they had a little bit more training there. So,
yeah. Or at least like some type of, online resource where they could go to.
You know what I think you should do? I got the solutions here, Kurt.
Okay. Right.
You need to have an MTC for people who have been called to be a bishop.
An MTC. I like that.
You really do. Even if it's like a virtual thing, like 6 weeks of something where you have like, you're going to learn the ropes and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that'd be so true. Because it's interesting because there are a lot, like when you're called as a mission president, you get that. It's about 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks where you go and to this intense training. But really the bishop role or some of these other leadership callings could really benefit from, because there's so much at the core of what we do. And I mean, we're week to week type of thing. So Audrey says, I like that. I guess my husband, who's a bishop and a software engineer, qualifies then. I couldn't agree more about the training. So,
yeah.
True that.
It's a real responsibility to be stewarding souls, right? So I think that I really appreciated the conversation I had with you and Nate Sharp and Clint Pulver, the 3 bishops in the conversation for the summit. It was pretty eye-opening for me.
Yeah. I mean, and it'll probably be eye-opening for me tomorrow. So when we record, these virtual summits, I've done several of these on the Leading Saints world, but I think they're just they're so interesting, but at the same time so easy to engage with, because anywhere in the world, and it's free, right? You just sign up with your email, and then just like you're at a conference, just day to day, there's a new agenda, new people speaking, and virtually you walk into that room and listen, and so I hope people will take advantage of it.
I really appreciated your help with it, because you've done a lot of these and you really helped me kind of build the machine. And it's just really rewarding for me. I've been recording all of these talks for the past 3 or 4 months to see all of them now ready to go. And I'm going to be honest with you, for just bearing our souls. When I put the announcement out on Sunday, I was like very emotional, and I was talking to Joy about it. And she's like, "Why are you so emotional?" I'm like, "Look at all these voices. Like, look at all these people who are willing to come to the table and have this conversation." So something that we've been putting work into that makes it easy for people to engage with, but also it just feels really important to this whole effort. So
yeah, I actually sent the link to a few people I know at the church and communications. I'm like, hey, you got to keep your eye on this. This is really special what's happening, because I don't think anything like it has ever happened. I mean, sure, we've had different interfaith conversations with professors and things, but I don't know, this just feels different and more of a step forward, and I hope it stimulates more discussion in the future. So so give people all the details and where to go. We'll link to it, of course. But
if you want to participate, go to www.hellosaintssummit.com. I will say we've been having some weird issues with the link. Just make sure you put the www in front of it, okay? Just act like it's 1995. Or you could also just go to hellosaints.life. I mean, it'll take you to the same place essentially. And you can check out all the information about who the speakers are, what the topics are, the schedule. There's a very easy form. Just put in your name and your email address, and you'll get a free ticket. And then there's other information you can have about additional perks if you're interested. But it's that simple. Just go there, check it out, sign up.
Yeah, cool. Any other point concept you want to squeeze in here before we wrap up, or do we do it?
I think it's good. I think I'd like to have more conversations like this with you, especially on Leading Saints. I like these conversations to get a little bit more into my past in the evangelical world and pastoral world. I spend so much time kind of leaning forward and learning about Latter-day Saint belief and culture that there's just a lot from my tribe that I'm hoping to continue to allow Latter-day Saints to have some insight into. So
cool. All right. So go sign up, everyone. It'll be worth it. And you'll see both of our mugs there and involved, and it'll be well worth the watch. So make it happen.
All right.